Okay, before we get started, I really have to eat something here, guys. I did not get a chance to eat breakfast today, and I figured it would just, if it works for Philip Danault, why not? Welcome to Hockey Inside Out. My name is Julian McKenzie, and this is Hockey Inside Out, back at it with the same cast of characters: Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette, Jessica Rusnak of CBC Daybreak Montreal, and Rick Green, former assistant coach for the Montreal Canadiens, former number one overall pick, former Montreal Canadiens defenseman. You can read out the Hockey DB if you so choose. Quite colorful if you take the time to look at it. I didn't think we'd be here. I didn't think we'd be in a second round series. Our show, talking about a second round series featuring the Montreal Canadiens. And here we are. Jessica Rusnak, if you so choose, you can gloat and have the floor and tell everyone I told you so, because you're among the few people who said the Montreal Canadiens would win over the Toronto Maple Leafs. Remember, Stu, I said your prediction in 5 looked pretty good?
Yeah. Nick Suzuki ruined it. I would have been bang on. If it wasn't for Nick Suzuki, my Leafs in 5 pick was perfect.
I didn't put any money on that bet.
Oh.
I could have been a rich lady today.
You could have been. Alas, no. We're going to get into the Canadiens and the Leafs and all that. Lord knows by the time you're watching this, people in Toronto are still stunned. But we have to talk about Game 1 between the Montreal Canadiens and the Winnipeg Jets. It goes the Canadiens' way until the very end. And not to kind of start on a sour note here or a sad note to talk about, but the Jake Evans hit laid out by Mark Scheifele near the end of the game. Jake Evans, playing on his birthday, turning 25 years old, scores his very first Stanley Cup playoffs goal into an empty net before Mark Scheifele, after going the full length of the ice. And sometimes people like to, overuse that and kind of overstep that. No, he literally went the full length of the ice before charging into Jake Evans. Just before we got to recording, it's very possible by the time you watch this, there could be a ruling, there could be a decision. It's not sure what that might be. But just before we got on, it was announced that I want to say it's not an in-person hearing for Mark Scheifele. Essentially, the way that's going with the Department of Player Safety, it looks as if Mark Scheifele can't be suspended more than 5 games. Panelists, I want to know, what's your view on the Mark Scheifele hit, and how many games do you think he deserves to sit out for?
Well, for me, it was really tough to watch. I mean, listen, when was the last time we saw, 2 guys getting carried off on stretchers in such a short period of time? And, the difference being, obviously, the one against Tavares was accidental, and this one against Evans was just a full-blown intent to hurt him, to almost take his head off. Charging from where he charged, and he was just on a mission to really, really hurt him. And he hopefully did not, put him out for a long period of time. But it was not nice to see. And I'm hoping that the NHL will make a statement. I don't know how strong a statement it will be, but they have to try and get a handle on discouraging this stuff from happening. And I would be really surprised if if the ruling came down that maybe he maybe get a couple of games at best, but I hope they make a stronger statement than that, and Jake Evans obviously gets well sooner than later.
It was sickening, disgusting, disgraceful, pick whatever word you want. That was not a hockey play. Scheifele's only intent when he left from deep in the Canadian zone, skating full speed, was to take Evans' head off. There's a freeze frame photo of the goal. Evans is already tucking the puck in the net. Scheifele's 2 feet away from him, and then just goes right for the head, drills him in the head. I was thinking, thank God that Evans' helmet didn't pop off with the force of the hit, because we might be talking about something much more serious, whether paralyzed or, heaven forbid, worse. But that seems to be what it might take for the NHL to come down hard on these, is somebody dying on the ice. And when Evans hit the ice, I thought he was dead. I mean, he was motionless lying there. It was scary. It was sickening. And, for Scheifele, he was upset the whole game. His anger got the best of him. He couldn't control it, and he was just looking to hurt somebody, and he did. And we don't know yet. Hopefully Evans is going to be okay. Hopefully he's not seriously injured. But you have to think it's a concussion. You have to wonder if that could be career-threatening moving forward. And, you know, on social media, these people, oh, the kid's got to keep his head up, blaming the victim. Sean Avery going on with some idiotic video saying it's a kid's fault. He had his head down. He looked up. When you watch the play, Evans went around, then he looked up to see where the other guys were. He saw that Scheifele was too far away to get him, and then he put the puck in the net. But after he put the puck in the net, Scheifele blew him up. A total intent to injure. In the NHL, you know, George Parros, the former goon in charge of player safety, who knows? You know, who knows what he's going to do with this one? I think he should be at least suspended for the rest of this series. If he's not and he comes back, I think it's going to get ugly. Joel Edmondson said after the game, if he's back in the series, you're going to make his life miserable. And maybe that's what Gary Bettman and the NHL want, because when you look what happened with Wilson, with Washington, after he slammed Panarin's head to the ice and only was fined, there was a big line brawl the next game. There was fights everywhere. And I guess that makes the NHL happy. I guess that's what they want. There's no place for these type of hits in hockey, but I think for some reason, Gary Bettman, the NHL, and the Department of Player Safety wants them in. I don't understand it, but we'll see what happens with suspension. But that was just disgusting.
Yeah, I think the NHL has to decide, do they want to be a hockey league or do they want to be like the WWE? Because as you mentioned, after what happened with Wilson, everyone tuned in to see that game. And I'm sure that the NHL was happy about that, but people are tuning in for the wrong reasons. You should be tuning in to see the skill of these players and not the possible fight. So I really hope that that's not going to be the case here. But yeah, Scheifele, he was frustrated. He took his frustration out on Jake Evans, horrible play. And even Dominic Ducharme said after the game that, yes, you want to play hard in the playoffs, but not hard like that. That was crossing the line, and players have to be responsible for what they do, and they can't just constantly be blaming the victim. Should have your head up. Well, you also have a responsibility as well. You should have let up at one point. You knew what was happening, and it's completely on Mark Scheifele, and I really hope that the NHL decides to take this seriously and send a message, because then at least other players know, yeah, that's not acceptable. You can't do that anymore. Brendan Gallagher has brought that up about what's a goal, what's goalie interference and what's not, because everything's contradictory. Same thing here with what's a clean hit, what's allowed and what isn't. If the NHL doesn't come down hard on examples like this, then they never will have a clear answer for the players.
Well, the hit Kadri laid out that got him an 8-game suspension wasn't nearly as bad as this one. Like, not even close. Kadri, a repeat offender, though, he gets 8 games. The NHL, the way their justice works, is if it's the first time you did something, well, we'll give you a little slap on the wrist. Don't worry about it. The next time you get suspended. If you want to stop these hits, you got to make the first time you do it a big suspension. Then guys won't do it again, or they'll think twice about doing it again.
And I think those that blame the so-called victim here, I think are not, not thinking the right way, because, in the old days or the old school, those type of things would go on. Probably a minor penalty, and the guy wouldn't get suspended in any way, shape, or form. But in today's game, there's no room for it. It's unacceptable, and I just hope they make a really strong statement and say, let's not allow this to happen anymore.
Well, you've all mentioned that in some form that you all hope the National Hockey League puts together some sort of strong statement. Do you feel that could still be done through this phone hearing that the presumably will have happened by the time you all watch this or whenever this is out? Do you think the fact that Mark Scheifele at this point can't be suspended more than 5 games for this, is that strong enough?
It's not strong enough, but I've given up trying to figure out how the NHL Department of Player Safety works and thinks. I've given up trying to think how the NHL works and thinks with video replay. I've given up trying to figure out how NHL referees call games in the playoffs. The game 7 against Toronto, Eric Stahl basically does a WWE takedown from behind on a Leafs defenseman, and it's no penalty. And then 2 minutes later, they call a chintzy sort of holding penalty against the Canadiens. Like, how was one a penalty? So when it comes to the NHL, I have no idea. Like, who knows? They live in their own little world there, which is stuck back in the 1960s or early 70s with the days of the Broad Street Bullies. The world has evolved. I've mentioned this show before. I grew up liking hockey fights and rock'em sock'em hockey. I like to think I've evolved. when we see what happens from concussions and CTE and the price some of these players pay later in life, but the NHL is stuck in the past when it comes to things like this.
Should be made clear at this. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just really hope it's not a fine, because that $5,000 fine means nothing to these players. It's just a joke at that point. They should be more, like the NBA. If they're going to fine a player, fine them hard, not just this $5,000.
Yeah, but that's the NHLPA's fault too, because they negotiate that. I mean, the NHLPA, a union's first job is supposed to be to protect its members. For whatever reason, the NHLPA seems to protect the Wilsons of the world and Scheifele on hits like this more than they protect the players that are lying on the ice carried off on a stretcher.
Yeah. Well, if by the time this is out, the ruling is made on Scheifele and it's fewer than 2 games, you can bleep this out if you want. I think it's bullshit. Anyway, let's move on to question 2, where we go from the terrible way to end game 1 with the hit from Mark Scheifele on Jake Evans, which is going to replay in my mind for a bit here. It's really tough to watch. And it took away from the fact that the Canadiens played a great game 1. I thought that the Canadiens would go into that game tired, considering the fact that they had played Monday night, considering the fact that they had gotten the big win over the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Winnipeg Jets had been chilling for a week, having swept the Edmonton Oilers. Instead, it was the Montreal Canadiens who came raring to go, and the Winnipeg Jets who sat back. Which Canadiens players impressed you the most in the Game 1 victory?
You know who really impressed me was Joel Armia.
That's big for you, because I know you like to rip on Joel Armia.
I mean, Joel Armia can be the invisible man on too many nights. I mean, the skill is obvious, the size, the shot, the ability to protect the puck, big. He's got everything, and he just doesn't seem to put it together. But Ducharme put him on that 4th line with Stahl and Perry. And watching the game, he just made so many smart decisions with the puck all over the ice. Penalty killing, he was outstanding. He just played such a strong game, and he made all this sort of simple, smart plays with the puck all over the ice. And I wonder how much of that is playing with the 2 veterans, Stahl and Perry. After a shift, coming and sitting beside them on the bench and then telling him, you perfect play here, maybe you should have done that there. But it just seems to be Joel Armia's hockey IQ has gone up significantly since playing with those 2 guys. And you notice him every time he was on the ice in that game, and you really notice him on the penalty kill. And he just smart plays all over the ice, and it was really impressive. And I think that's a pretty good 4th line. Stahl with Perry and Armia, 2 veterans who play a big physical game. Armia can play physical, and Armia can also score if he gets a chance. So I think that line is going to be play a really key role in this series moving forward. And when you're watching game 2, just watch Joel Armia and see if he continues just little smart plays with the puck all over the place. And it was for a guy who has a tendency to disappear. He certainly didn't disappear in that game.
For me, it was Shea Weber, just because the amount of minutes that he logged in the previous series, especially the Game 7, not having much rest. Also, the end of the season, Shea Weber wasn't playing his best hockey, and he played a real solid game, and he played the kind of performance that you need from a captain and a veteran defenseman. And he also got rewarded as well. So to me, I was impressed with that, because I was curious to see how he would react after having all those minutes and then short turnaround.
I'm really happy to mention Kotkaniemi's name, because, there's a kid that everybody has been beating on and, wanting more from him. And with a little bit of patience, a little bit of maturity, I'm seeing a lot of good things happening with him in his overall game. He's engaged, he's physical. He doesn't seem to be shy or intimidated in any way, shape, or form. And he's contributing. And this is, why they drafted him. And I think he's handled himself very, very well, and I think there's nothing but greater things, for him in the future. And then you've got to mention Suzuki again in this mix for what he's bringing each and every night. I mean, this guy is a threat every time he's on the ice, and he just seems to be getting better. And the timing is right for him to bring his A game each and every night. And again, while I'm babbling on here, we got to throw in a defenseman in Edmonton as a guy that has just been outstanding, and you know, he has been a real plus, obviously, in doing a great job back there and keeping that defensive core doing what they do best, and that's shutting down opposition. So a lot of positives for a lot of guys in that group, and hopefully they're going to continue, and who knows where this is going to go.
Yeah, for Kotkaniemi, you know, healthy scratch game 1 against the Leafs. He's got 4 goals in the 8 games since then. That matches the 4 goals he scored in 10 postseason games last year. You know, I asked him after the game last night on the Zoom, you know, how do you explain, you know, he had 5 goals in 56 games during the season, and he has 4 goals in 8 playoff games. And I asked him, how do you explain that? And he said, I just like the big games. And he's becoming a big game player. He had a sort of an interesting comment when he said, you know, who would have thought a little rest would be good for a 20-year-old guy? Maybe a little bit of a shot at the coach about making him a healthy scratch for game 1. But the kid, he's confident, and he's got a little bit of cockiness with him. I mean, when he showed up for that Zoom interview after his OT goal with the Indiana Jones hat and the 3-piece
drip,
that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. So for Kotkaniemi, though, but he seems, we've talked about how Carey Price can be like 2 different players. There's Carey Price in the regular season now, and there's Carey Price in the playoffs. It seems to be the same thing with Kotkaniemi. I mean, he's been going to the dirty areas in front of the net, paying the price. And he also spoke after the game about how it was an honor, was the word he used, to play with a guy like Corey Perry. And you wonder how much of Corey Perry is rubbing off on Kotkaniemi with that ability to go to the dirty areas and play a playoff game. Corey Perry plays a playoff game. That's why Marc Bergevin went and got him. Marc Bergevin likes to say there's players who get you to the playoffs, and there's players who get you through the playoffs. Kotkaniemi is looking like a guy who gets you through the playoffs right now, and playing with confidence. And I love that hat. I thought that was pretty cool.
I just wish maybe the hat kind of matched with more of the outfit, because it was like a different shade. But anyway, we're not here to talk about fashion. I also want to give a props. Not that we wouldn't want to talk about fashion. It's still cool to do, but you know, for the purpose of the show, Corey Perry, I'm glad you mentioned him because of the fact that he was willing to go to the dirty areas. That's part of his game, but he showed out in that area. Eric Staal getting himself a nice goal off of the work done by Corey Perry to just power to the net and take on an oncoming swarm of Winnipeg Jets defenders. At one point, there were like 4 of them that were about to collapse on him, and he still got the pass off. And Joel Edmondson, I think, also got like a nice little secondary assist on that as well. I know we look at primary assists and secondary assists and all that, but that's a pretty nice secondary assist for Joel Edmondson, who has proven throughout the season into the playoffs as well to be the team's most consistent defenseman. Even if he's not flashy, I don't feel he makes too many mistakes. I mean, there's been times where he has, but at least in game 1, he did not make too many mistakes. So those 2 guys in particular, I really want to shout out. Steady Eddie. Steady Eddie. The Montreal Canadiens entered game 1 of their series with the Winnipeg Jets with the same lineup they had for game 7. But with Jake Evans taking the hit that he took in game 1, and who knows if he'll even be available to play any other game in this series, let alone play game 2. Maybe that means the Canadiens could put Thomas Tatar back in the lineup or find some other option. Who knows? Eric Gustafsson played in game 1, probably played the worst game of any Canadiens defenseman. Does that open the door for Alexander Romanov? Do you think we'll see Romanov or Tatar in this Canadiens Jets series?
You know, I really wish they would give Romanov the opportunity to show what he can do in the playoffs. It's not like you have 6 stellar defensemen that you're like, man, it's really hard to try and fit him in here. You know, there's a perfect opportunity to give him some playoff experience. And if this is going to be one of the defensemen you want on the team for a long period of time, put him in, especially now early on in the series when you're up. It's not as, there's not as much pressure as, say, maybe later on in the Toronto series. It's an easy way to kind of ease him in to playoff hockey and to see what he has to bring. And I just can't understand why that he's not in the lineup for game 1 against the Winnipeg Jets. Now, with the injury to Jake Evans and depending on how long he's going to be out, I think that Thomas Tatar will come back in. He's got the experience. Maybe, you know, having a few games of not being in the lineup might spark something with him. But just a good thing that the Canadiens are finding a way to score goals and they're not, snake bit like they were early on in the series against the Toronto Maple Leafs, that maybe he can jump on that offensive bandwagon and find his old ways.
I would really like to see Romanov get in. Like Jess said, you get him in early now. He's the kind of player that this series again is perfect for him. I mean, he's able to skate. He's able to hit. He's able to make good plays under pressure. And this kid has to have an opportunity, and I think he will handle it if he's given the chance. And I'm hopeful that they find a way to get him in there, because I think he could be a big advantage versus Gustafsson back there on the blue line. Time will tell, but I like the opportunity if given that he could bring something to the team. As far as up front goes, Tatar, I'm not sure what's going on there, other than they're not really excited about obviously putting him in the lineup if he's healthy. So that being said, I guess Lehkonen is probably the go-to guy. But anyways, we'll see soon enough what they decide on their lineup.
I agree with you, Rick. I think if Evans can't go, and I can't imagine him playing after that hit, and if Lehkonen's healthy, I think we're going to see Lehkonen in that spot instead of Tatar. Lehkonen plays a similar type of game to Jake Evans. For Tatar, he was a healthy scratch in Vegas when Vegas went to the Stanley Cup final. His game just doesn't seem to suit the playoffs for whatever reason, whether it's physicality, the tighter checking in the playoffs. Tatar just doesn't seem able to get the job done. So I think if Lehkonen's healthy, I think we're going to see Lehkonen take Evans' spot. With Romanov, if he doesn't get in the lineup for Game 2, we're not going to see him in the playoffs, I don't think, unless somebody gets injured. Gustafsson, that brutal play he made on the power play that resulted in the shorthanded goal that changed the momentum. The Habs were up 2-0. Everything was looking good. They're on the power play. He makes a weak play in the offensive zone, goes the other way. They score. Gustafsson ended up with less than 7 minutes of ice time. They're obviously afraid to put him on the ice. They put him on the ice sort of like this. I think Luke Richardson on the bench, sort of one eye open, one eye closed, waiting to see what kind of disaster might happen. With Romanov, him and Kulak played well together, I thought, during the regular season. And if they're your third pairing, I think, you're maybe not going to put them out every third shift, but you can put them out every fifth or sixth and give the top four guys a bit of a break. Because I think as this series goes on, if they keep relying on Weber, Sherratt, Edmondson, and Petrie as much, they're going to wear down. I mean, you can't keep playing these guys. Weber played 40 minutes in that overtime game, in Game 6 against the Leafs. It's going to catch up to them. They got to get a third pairing, and they're afraid to put Kulak and Gustafsson on the ice at the same time. They're just spotting them in with other guys. I think they need to get a third pairing that you can put the third pairing out on the ice together, even if it's only 10 minutes a game, just to give the top four guys a break. And I think Kulak and Romanov showed during the regular season they can do that. And with Romanov, the Jets could become a physical series, and Romanov he hits hard, he hits clean, and I think he could have an impact in this series. But again, if Ducharme doesn't put him in for Game 2, I don't think we're going to see the kid throughout the playoffs unless somebody gets hurt.
I still think if the Canadiens put Alexander Romanov, they have nothing to lose. I think, if anything, heading into Game 2 might be the best opportunity to play Alexander Romanov. If, for whatever reason, the Canadiens don't get the win, the Canadiens can always go back to Montreal and play Games 3 and 4. And I still think that Alexander Romanov, considering how the other rookies have played, considering what he's shown the Montreal Canadiens fan base to this point, he's shown that he can be a fearless player on the ice. He's shown that he can be physical, despite his small stature. He's shown that he can be a little quick and even move the puck when needed. I'm really surprised that the team has not played him to this point in the playoffs. I'd like to see him play. And I think Game 2 would be the best opportunity for him to get that time. And you're right, if he's not going to play in Game 2, then good Lord, when are we actually going to see this kid play again? As you mentioned last episode, the same Alexander Romanov who joined the Canadiens in the bubble to get the experience of what it's like to play in the playoffs, and to this point has yet to feature into the lineup. So it'll remain to be seen what the Canadiens lineup will look like for Game 2. We've reached this point in the episode. Let's talk about what the hell we witnessed in that first round series between the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Game 1, they win that game, and then they lose the next 3, then they win the next 3. There's a lot of surprises. A lot of things surprised me. What do you think of all the surprises in this magnificent upset for the Canadiens over the Maple Leafs. What surprised you the most?
Well, for me, like I think a lot of people after Game 4 and the way that the Canadiens were playing were going, oh boy, that's it. There's no possible way they're going to make a comeback. And, playoffs is about a test of character. And I got to give full marks to each and every one on the Canadiens team that said, I'm not going to listen to the criticism. I want to continue to keep playing, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to find a way to win. And those guys, they dug in. They made Toronto pay the price in every area of the rink. And they started to plant the doubt seed in Toronto's mind that said, you know what? We're going to beat you guys. And I always go back to the psychological edges that come with playing certain teams. I remember in '86, it was just like in the dressing room, we knew as a group we were not going to lose. And, when that gets into the minds of the opposition, there's no stopping you. And, judging by what we've seen from Game 7 right to carry over to the first game against Winnipeg, this is all good stuff. And you've got a lot of guys doing a lot of things really well, and it couldn't come at a better time.
Well, as you mentioned off the top of the show, I picked the Leafs in 5, and that pick looked really good going into Game 5 because the Canadiens lost Game 4. It's like there's hardly any effort. Like it just looked like they had packed it up and they were already making their tee times for the golf course later in the week. And they came out in Game 5, and Nick Suzuki scored the overtime goal, and then Kotkaniemi got the overtime goal in Game 6, and they were a new team after that. I wrote a column saying it brought back memories of '93 when the Habs won 10 overtime games in a row and went on to win the Cup, and nobody expected the Habs to do well. There were a lot of similar scenarios. They struggled coming at the end of the regular season. Patrick Waugh wasn't good at the end of the regular season. He found his game like Carey Price has found his game now. I think those overtime wins, they just give a boost. They maybe give a sense of belief to the Canadiens. Because when they played in Game 4, it's like they didn't believe that they could win the series. Game 5 OT win, Game 6 OT win. They've been a different team since then. They have been playing Dominic Ducharme's system to a T. Puck support all over the ice. They're playing as a team. It's not just Carey Price. They're playing as a team. The forwards, and Corey Perry talked about that, saying we're 20 guys together, and we put a lot of pressure on each other. We expect a lot from each other, and I think they've really become a team during this playoffs. And I think those 2 overtime wins were what sparked it. And that's why I picked the Habs to win in 6 in this series against the Jets, because I just think they're riding that emotion and the adrenaline and the momentum that they picked up from those 2 overtime wins. And I think they believe in themselves more now than maybe they did before that. And I think they're saying, man, we are good. Maybe we can do something here. You got guys like Corey Perry. They talked about, before Game 5, with Corey Perry addressing the team and saying, guys, you don't get a lot of chances like this in the playoffs. That's why Corey Perry came back to play this year, because he got to the Stanley Cup final last year, didn't win with Dallas, and he wanted it again. And, he stood up and spoke. Eric Stahl stood up and spoke. Apparently Weber stood up and spoke. And they've been a different team. Since those 2 overtime wins, this is a different team. I was interested to see if they'd be able to carry it over from the Toronto series to Winnipeg, and they did. So again, I'm sticking with my prediction now, Habs in 6 in this series. They're going to be really hard to beat.
Yeah, I think that Game 5 overtime goal was kind of the momentum changer of this series, especially when you look at, it was a great goal. That's the thing, too. It was not just kind of a fluky goal. Everyone felt really good about it themselves, and they had that belief again. And then I think that sparked something with the players being able to find the back of the net, that being able to score goals was so difficult early on in that series with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then there was like a new sense of confidence in these players, and they were getting help from a bunch of different players, not just relying on just a few to score a goal. And that was the big difference. And I'm sure that pregame talk with the leadership group really did spark something with them. And then they went out on the ice and they got the win. And since then, they've been rolling with that momentum. And so far, it's been a really good thing.
And that Game 6 overtime, they were outshot 13-2 in that period. Going with the 4 defense, as I mentioned earlier, the defense were out of gas. Like if that went to a second overtime period, I don't know if they would have been able to. They would have been down to 2 defense because the other 2 guys might not have had anything left. But they caught it. Taking advantage of your opportunities and your chances are so key in the playoffs. And Kotkaniemi had that shot. He scored. They won the game, and I think that if they however far the Canadiens go on in the playoff run, that was the turning point for them as a team, was Kotkaniemi's overtime goal in Game 6.
I just found in this series between the Canadiens and the Leafs, the Maple Leafs made just untimely mistakes that further exasperated their exasperation and the seed of doubt that had been planted in them in Game 5. And it's not to take away from the Canadiens at all, who brought energy from the get in Game 5, Game 6, and in Game 7. And they did a tremendous job of keeping Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews at bay. Philip Danault, who a lot of people in Montreal made a big deal about the fact that he was not this offensive forward and he wasn't able to contribute offensively. Grand total of 1 point throughout 7 games because he made it his mission to just disturb Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, especially Austin Matthews. Again, one point for Danault, but also 1 goal for Austin Matthews. Danault deserves a heck of a lot of credit. That being said, the Toronto Maple Leafs, a 3-1 series lead. Game 5 in overtime. Alex Galchenyuk, probably his greatest contribution to the Canadiens in years with the turnover. That mistake. Game 6, I believe it was Travis Dermott with the spin pass to, well, essentially Kotkaniemi's stick, which leads to the Game 6 winner. And I believe that game was also the Mitch Marner puck over glass penalty. And Game 7, we didn't even mention the fact that the Canadiens thrived off the fact they got to play in front of their home fans at the Bell Center. Game 7, the Leafs have the opportunity to do so in front of hundreds of healthcare workers. For whatever reason, they had like in-arena crowd noise being pumped in, which might have drowned out those fans as well. But the Leafs have a golden opportunity to take it to the Canadiens in Game 7, and they just don't. It's a combination of the Canadiens turning it around for themselves and playing well, but the Leafs, their fans, even the media over there, just knowing that once it got to Game 7, a lot of hope was about to be lost, and it seeped into the way that the Leafs played. They blew it. The Canadiens, I'm still surprised they got here. They deserve full marks for getting to the second round, but the Leafs blew it. They absolutely blew it.
They blew it, but the Habs beat them in Game 7.
Yes, they did. Oh, yes, they did.
Them. They played, the games before that, the overtime and that, the Leafs had the chance, and they did. They choked. I mean, those games 5 and 6, they choked in overtime. The 13-2, the shots against in Game 6, they couldn't score. But Game 7, the Habs beat the Leafs. They beat them. They frustrated them. They checked them, and they beat them. And you say with Philip Danault, if I owned a pizza place, I would have been on the phone the next morning with him saying, okay, we're doing some kind of an advertising deal, because nobody ever deserved a large pepperoni pizza to himself more than Philip Danault did after shutting down Austin Matthews. And I know the Sportsnet Twitter stats account tweeted out something after the series saying, Marner and Matthews were only on the goal. I think it was either 1 or no 5-on-5 goals that whole series. Like, that was a really good thing. Man. Marner and Matthews are paid to score goals. They're not paid to check. Philip Danault was paid to check, and he did a great job. And he was, to me, along with Carey Price. They don't win that series without Carey Price, but Philip Danault was, like, to me, like the second star of that series. And then Shea Weber on defense, I thought, was outstanding. 40 minutes in that overtime game. A great job of just keeping guys to the outside, playing physical along the wall and in front of the net. But Philip Danault, that pizza, your smile with the pizza at the start of the show is pretty good, Julian. But Philip Danault, nobody ever deserved a large, all-dressed pepperoni pizza to himself more than Philip Danault.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. Dude. You gotta eat. What?
But yeah, no, Stu, I completely agree that, Philip Danault was a huge difference maker in this series. Of course, Carey Price, he really kept them in there. And he's their Montreal Canadiens top player, and he showed up, and the Toronto Maple Leafs top player didn't show up for this series. But I also want to say Brendan Gallagher scoring that first goal in Game 7. I think if the Canadiens didn't get the first goal of the game, I don't know if the outcome would have been the same, but that gave them some confidence. And Gallagher even said, too, in the postgame that it's pretty obvious, the statement, but it's so much easier once you have the lead and you feel better about yourself. And if Brendan Gallagher didn't score that goal, I don't know what the outcome would have been, but I would have to say that he's kind of one of my stars from that series because of that.
I think the whole group collectively playing with so much desperation. I mean, obviously, Price was there when there was some areas of a few breakdowns, but the group of defense, the forwards working in the defensive zone, especially a guy like Danault, who was very, very effective. And I remember, one of the best defensive centermen that I played with in Carbonell, we had this system down in our zone that we could basically shut down a lot of the best offensive players. And I think as a group, the Canadiens worked so well in eliminating their high-skilled guys by being very aggressive on them. Really impressed with how they were able to get in shooting lanes, and a lot of times they got sticks in passing lanes, and these type of details of the game allowed them to really mess up the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I think the bottom line is Canadian players wanted it more, and the Leafs did not show up. So c'est la vie, and the better team won.
Jesse mentioned Gallagher's goal. He had said it was his first goal of the playoffs. He had said earlier in the series that he knew at some point he was going to have to score a big goal for the team. That was a big goal. He scored a big goal in Game 1 against Winnipeg also. But as much as that goal gave the Canadiens confidence, Gallagher's goal against Leafs in Game 7, Jack Campbell has to stop that shot. And I think for the Leafs have a long history of choking in the playoffs. Excuse me. One of the reasons for that is goalies letting in bad goals. That was a bad goal. And I'm sure the guys on the bench might have gone, oh, no, here we go again. The goalie lets in a softie like that, and now we got to try and fight back. So as much confidence as that goal gave the Canadiens, I think it was really demoralizing on the Leafs bench. And, for the Leafs, you look at that team, and I wonder, they booted Lou Lamoriello out as GM to bring in the boy wonder to take over.
Okay, we're not going to do this. Don't do this, Stu.
Don't
do this. This is not Leafs Inside Out. We could do a whole episode on Lou Lamoriello and Kyle Dubas. We can go there if you want, but I know that's not the show. I'm tired of people getting on Kyle Dubas here. I'm sorry. I'm tired of it. He did everything they needed for that team to get there. It's on the players.
No, but I think the players, with some of their star players, living in Toronto in that market, I think their egos maybe got a little bit too big. Austin Matthews spoke in the season about how it was almost boring, like winning so much against playing the same teams, and they couldn't wait for the playoffs to start. Mm-hmm. And I think they just really thought that they were just going to cakewalk through this. And when the Canadiens, and it looked like they would after the first 4 games, but when the Canadiens started fighting back, as Rick said, they seem to want it more than the Leafs, or were willing to pay more of a price than the Leafs were. And I think the Leafs just thought their talent alone was going to be enough to win, and it wasn't.
Talent can only do so much. At the end of the day, you need hard work, will, and Mark Bergevin's favorite word, character, to get you through the Stanley Cup playoffs, which the Canadiens are still in, and the Toronto Maple Leafs are no longer a part of. I think that's pretty much it. I think we've run our course for this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out. Great job, everybody. Well done, everyone, as usual. If you have questions for any of us, do we think the Canadiens are going to win this series? What's your favorite pizza topping? I don't know. Let us know in the comments section below, and visit hockeyinsideout.com to check out other full episodes and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would really appreciate that as well.
I want to see Julian and Danault do a pizza commercial together. How's that?
I would love that. Danault is definitely getting himself a pizza commercial this offseason. I would love to do a pizza commercial with Philip Danault.